Welcome to the Stoa. The Stoa is a digital campfire where we cohere and dialogue about what matters most at the knife's edge of what's happening now. Actually, just one moment. Maybe I'm going to give you co-host access if you can let people in while I'm talking. Cool. All right, check-ins. I had a big sandwich before this, and then I had a cider, so I'm a little bit sluggish and a little woozy, and not as focused as I want to be. I'm about 5 to 10% nervous, and the rest is just stoic. So welcome to the Stoa. I am Peter Lindbergh, the steward of the Stoa. The Stoa is a place for us to cohere and dialogue about what matters most at the knife's edge of this moment. And today we have Brent Cooper. Brent Cooper, meta-modern superstar / controversial rap battler. And so Brent is a political sociologist by training, mystic by nature, rebel by choice, and he is the executive director of the Abstract organization. And today he's having a section called Who is Sensing the Sensemakers? And I have a sense it's going to be a critique on the sense-making web, and I'm very curious to see what he is going to say. And so how it's going to work is Brent is going to talk for anywhere about 20 to 30 minutes, going to share his thoughts, and then we're going to pivot to Q&A. So if you have any questions in the chat box, just pop in the chat box. If you don't want to be recorded, just indicate that, and then I'll read on your behalf. And no personal recordings of this, by the way. So a few people are recording other sessions, and especially on gallery view mode, and there's consent issues there. So please no recording, unsanctioned recordings. That being said, I think I said everything. So let me give you permission to unmute yourself, Brent. Yeah, floor is yours.
Hey, thank you. So yeah, I don't know exactly what I'm going to say because part of this is in reference to long articles I've written that people don't like to read and they like to straw man. And also I notice, there's a lot of friendly, familiar faces here, so that's good. I don't see any enemies, which I was secretly hoping a little bit. I want their engagement. So I'm just going to go off my notes here, and we'll see how far I get. I'm looking forward to the Q&A. It's hard to know where to begin because there's not enough time to cover it all. And there's also many angles into this. And in prepping, part of me also realized, in conversations with other people and reflection that it doesn't matter what I want to talk about necessarily. Like, this isn't just a forum for me to, do whatever I want. That would be my own platforms. So I respect, the idea of the Stoa and this space and what we can accomplish together. And, there's also this expectation with that, rather than just shit on everybody, which I would love to do, people want to be seduced, right? Like, that's what this is about. You don't want truth bombs and debunks. You're tired of that. You want to be seduced. You want sexiness. And Peter's made this clear in letter number 43. I'm basically a walking erection, he says. And in letter 38, it's time to seduce the culture war. So that's a high bar. That's tough for me to live up to, because I don't feel particularly sexy, and maybe I don't want to be sexy, or maybe I can't be. Maybe I'm ugly, and maybe that is the point. Maybe to reveal some of the bias against ugliness, the ugly truth. So that's what a lot of my critiques are about, and I want to just kind of contextualize my critiques as it's like 10% of my work as a whole. It's not my main jam, but a lot of people do punditry and wade into the culture war stuff. And what I'm trying to do in those critiques is take a kind of meta perspective and also as someone with kind of a foot in each, you know, many feet in different camps, if you will, right? So sense making, the meta crisis, socialism, leftism, you know, progressivism. So it's difficult to, you know, try to you know, take that meta perspective and try to bring people together, especially when I personally don't have the means or the demeanor or the, you know, the kind of wherewithal to keep up with it. And so there's a sense with, you know, this idea of critique, like it's exhausting because you critique one person, let's say Peterson, because, you know, it goes back to somebody like him in a sense, but the critique doesn't work, it doesn't land. And it's not just my critique personally, it's like the entire kind of leftist enterprise to debunk this man, you know, just kind of empowers him. So, you know, as I critique that and also people close to me, it's like whack-a-mole. You know, I get exhausted. These problems keep popping up, and then it makes me look like the bad guy. And I feel like I'm doing kind of intellectual triage. You know, you have to run around and like figure out who's the most hurt, most damaged, and try to fix it. And I feel like the mimetic mediators are kind of coming to the scene and being like, okay, we know that everybody's hurt. We're going to kind of listen to everybody's pain all at the same time and, you know, try to work it out that way. So there's a basic tension there. So let me just restart with what the title is. Who's sensing the sense makers? The simple answer is nobody. I don't see anybody kind of being remotely self-critical enough or engaging in the self-learning about the topics that really matter as it relates to social theory and politics and praxis. And, you know, there's a lot of talk about collective intelligence, but no actual hooking up to kind of mass movements or actual public intellectuals. And then, you know, there's no praxis. Like sense making, in fairness, by definition, is not about those things. Sense making, by definition, is a process of by which people give meaning to their collective experiences. Right, so that's a lot of what this is about. It's, you know, going from the Wikipedia definition here, it's been defined as the ongoing retrospective development of plausible images and that rationalize what people are doing. So by definition, it's not critical. It's kind of feeling in the dark, you know, and taking cues from the culture war. And that's not the approach that I'm taking. So I end up in a different place. So just, you know, and as many of you know, but for whoever else doesn't, the sense making web, so to speak, is like, you know, the Stoa, Rebel Wisdom, the Emerge Network, Integral Theory communities, Game B, and Rally Point Alpha, the intellectual dark web, of course, and the intellectual deep web, if you will, as another kind of adjacent space. And there's a lot of overlap between these. And from where I come from a tradition of sociology, there's a lot of animosity towards that. And there's a lot of a priori rejection of that. There's a lot of, like, to put it as nicely as I can, there's a ton of ignorance around these topics, meaning people just don't know what the source material is. If you hear certain books brought up, like say White Fragility, it's usually to kind of straw man that book or books like it, where, you know, the starting point, an authentic, good faith representation of the material. It's a reaction. It's reactionary to it. And so we see these fallacies committed by everybody, not just the followers of these groups on social media, but the self-defined leading sense makers themselves, right? And just to kind of frame in the simplest terms what, you know, what the kind of absurdity is why are the leading sense makers mostly men who can't talk about feminism, or at least do it justice? Why are the leading sense makers mostly white who can't talk about race? Why are the leading sense makers mostly psych obsessed and they can't talk about sociology? And why are most of them, especially in like integral spaces in the intellectual dark web, why are they centrist reactionaries who can't talk about politics? So these are simple questions on the face of it, but they're actually really complex questions. Like it you know, it's unpacked throughout my critiques in varying degrees, and it would take a long time to work through it today in terms of a kind of lecture. And so above all that, though, it's like, why and how, given all those things, do these people place themselves above the culture war as some sort of cutting edge of critical thinking and social change, right? That is the biggest kind of hypocrisy to me on the face of it. But I make these critiques from a good faith place because I believe they can improve, right? There's a lot of intelligence in these communities, but intelligence is distinct from intellect, right? So what actual intellectual work means is not well defined in these so-called intellectual spaces, and it's certainly not well executed. You know, each of these figures, you know, have like a lot of right-wing followers. They have a lot of critics. They criticize the left without engaging. Sometimes there's debates which are just about the spectacle. Sometimes there's good faith engagements which by the kind of structural definition, you know, structural context, cannot be functional, cannot be good faith. You know, that's with the intellectual dark web. With the sense-making spaces, there's a lot more curation. There's a lot more defensiveness and, you know, protection of the image and, you know, very slow intellectual progress, like very marginal critique, right? And it's just not sufficient, especially when we come to, you know, back to somebody like Peterson. Now, to Peter's credit, you know, he's had you know, his own journey and his own reasons for taking it slow. And he's had a couple Peterson critics on, like Michael Brooks and Ben Burgess. I've written a lot of critical stuff about Peterson that also could be its own show. I mean, I'll just give one kind of side story in lieu of going down rabbit holes with that, and that's that. You know, Michael Brooks gave his IDW talk at the Stoa, criticized Peterson a lot, and then days later, I'm in the Stoa talk on cynicism with Justin Murphy. And, you know, they're talking about parrhesia and speaking truth to power. And then Peter says, you know, well, I guess Peterson would be an example of this because he's, you know, he's going out there speaking his truth, being bold. And, you know, we can give him a gold star for that. There's a little bit of that going on, but by and large, the catalyst of Peterson's fame is a lie. And many things that keep him going are blatant lies or misrepresentations. And I don't want to call them lies, but what do you call it? What do you call it when someone is wrong or being hyperbolic or distorting the truth? You know, I think it treads into lie territory. And, you know, what launched Peterson was his critique of Bill C-16. You know, from what I've seen, Peterson's whole approach has been debunked. You know, he's not a friend of the trans community. That doesn't mean he's transphobic, but it means, like with these issues of racism, that he doesn't know how to advocate for the justice for those communities. And so the meta point here is like, well, if I'm correct about that, and I think I am, and many other things Peterson's been wrong about, like saying white privilege is a Marxist lie, that is a reactionary lie. But that aside, if I'm right, well, why, why is he still so popular, not only with the average person, but with all these so-called intellectuals? Why do they gravitate towards him? Why do they focus on the positive stuff and ignore the negative stuff? And there's deep, complicated, uncomfortable answers to these questions. And so this is why I'm never going to stop criticizing somebody like Peterson, because, if he really believes in logos and, man-to-man combat or whatever, then he, he has to face his critics. And, going into a spectacle like facing Zizek, where he got like just embarrassed, is not sufficient. I feel like we still don't have kind of closure on all of that. Anyways, moving on. In a lot of these spaces, I think, going back to the intelligence thing, there's a lot of weaponized intelligence, right? Like, so I criticize some people for being, not so bright or not so good faith, but that's not completely fair, because there's just a major distinction that's missing here. I'm going to read from this book, Anti-Intellectualism in American Life. It's from 1964. And there's tons of gems in here, but I want to just focus on that distinction between intelligence and intellect. Intelligence works within the framework of limited but clearly stated goals, and may be quick to shear away questions of thought that do not seem to help in reaching them. Finally, it is of such universal use that it can be daily seen at work and admired alike by simple or complex minds, right? So this is why we're all wowed by them. Intellect, on the other hand, is the critical, creative, and contemplative side of mind. Whereas intelligence seeks to grasp, manipulate, reorder, adjust, intellect examines, ponders, wonders, theorizes, criticizes, imagines. Intelligence will seize the immediate meaning in a situation and evaluate it. Intellect evaluates evaluations and looks for the meanings of situations as a whole. Intelligence can be praised as a quality in animals. Intellect, being a unique manifestation of human dignity, is both praised and assailed as a quality in men. When the difference is so defined, it becomes easier to understand why we sometimes say that the mind of admittedly penetrating intelligence is relatively unintellectual, and why, by the same token, we see among minds that are unmistakably intellectual a considerable range of intelligence. And like this book is super important, but I just want to, kind of make the point that the intellectual dark web, right? I'm making the claim that it's anti-intellectual, but that doesn't mean that they're not engaged with intellectual things, right? That's the kind of paradox at work here. So there's a quote here from earlier in the page. So the leading anti-intellectuals are usually men deeply engaged with ideas, often obsessively engaged with this or that outworn or rejected idea. And that's the key, because so many of these ideas that they take up, like Sam Harris with the bell curve and Charles Murray, it's been debunked already in the past. But, the public and the mass media, is not quick to realize that, right? There's a kind of pattern of history, and it goes back to Socrates at least, right? This is the kind of the tradition, right? Is to kind of disparage and exile and, execute critical thinkers that threaten the status quo. So we're often not hearing from the people that we should be, right? The intellectual dark web blows up, and it's mostly white men, mostly obsessed with old ideas, right? Classical liberalism, and to various extents, race realism, like with Quillette, and they all endorse Quillette, and these things become contentious because of the culture war, not because there's some inherent truth in what they're saying. So, and there's also, well, I wanted to say something quickly about Socrates. I'll come back to that. just this idea of Western civilization, Michael Brooks has talked about this, like it's largely a myth, right? And it's perpetuated mostly by the right, but also the center as a truth. It's reified, right? We believe in it because, it is written, but that's not the deeper reality. So I have a sort of degree of faith, at least in the people present and my allies, that they can see beyond that kind of facade of Western civilization that keeps us trapped in this culture war, right? Because those people, the intellectual dark web, that are fighting it the hardest for their own interests, it's really built on this kind of myth, right? And if you're to undercut that myth, and Peterson's a vehement defender of myth, it all kind of collapses. And then there's, the aspect of the attentional economy, right? The kind of unequal access people have to platforms, right? And free speech. And, the irony of the IDW whining about free speech while they're platformed in the New York Times. And not only that, if they were real intellectuals, if they were critical, they would be critical of the New York Times, of Barry Weiss, who promoted them, and of her politics, right? There's a lot of like tacit collusion between a lot of these people with no politics or bad politics. And the undercurrent here is like, because I fight with a lot of apolitical people too in the emerge space. Like the truth is, you actually can't escape politics. Everything is political. At least it's political for somebody, right? All social issues are political, and politics is one major lever to intervene on that. So about Socrates, like ancient philosophy can be instructive, right? But as I was saying, Western civilization is a myth. Like ancient Greece was not homogenous, it was cosmopolitan, and it had shared or stolen culture from Africa and the Middle East. It also had slaves, so we shouldn't like be overly admiring any of these societies. Same thing with like classical liberalism. And I took a classical studies course and had a very radical prof. He made a big impression on me. He was half indigenous, so he was always at odds with the administration because of discrimination issues. And he was just like very, very radical, and he would use mainstream textbooks to teach this stuff about ancient Greece and ancient Rome, but only to demonstrate how garbage those textbooks were, right? And this isn't just a callous postmodern move to dismiss it all, right? He actually had like insights into kind of like, a sort of new paradigm and what we should be doing, like how ancient Rome is like the US empire today, right? And what the actual lessons are. So we're not just repeating history over and over again. So, I think, I mean, we're way past time to hold up a mirror and stress test these leading sense makers, whether it's ourselves looking in the mirror or holding each other accountable. And not just about the bad ideas that people spread, but like how we treat each other. Like I'm castigated for being, prickly or whatever, but like I've been treated pretty poorly, right? I've been treated like Socrates. So that's the irony here. Like, why do we keep murdering Socrates in Socrates' name? Like, when are we collectively actually going to listen to like whistleblowers and critical theorists? And mass movements, and actually engage in political revolution, even if it's just like sitting back in your computer and just like putting a tiny bit of pressure in the right direction, because really maybe that's all we can do, right? We're trying to move the needle, but we have to agree what direction we're moving the needle in. So I don't view myself as a culture warrior. I come to the culture war saying like a lot of it has been a waste of time for the past years, a lot of it has been avoidable. Like we could say on one hand, you know, well, this is where the people are at, you know, they gotta live out this stuff. But the leaders, whether they're legitimate or not, have some responsibility, and they have to be accountable, right? So the IDW had opportunities to really do good, and they didn't, in my view. And then the people who were adjacent to that or involved with that kind of facilitated whatever they wanted to do, right? And, you know, and where is it today? Like, you know, it's fragmented, but Eric and Brett Weinstein are still like aggressively whitewashing their own image through these various platforms and not taking critique. I don't engage much on Twitter, but I see every day that they're just, you know, saying nonsense like, oh, I'm for Black Lives Matter, but I can't say it, I can't agree to it because, you know, it's too SJW-y for me. And it's like, you know, they're not stress testing their own ideas. They're getting attacked a lot for sure, but they're not listening. And people aren't listening to the critics, right? The critics that I follow are like light years ahead, but they're, you know, sometimes relatively small. So, you know, it comes back to like this disposition towards critique. Like, what do we do with it? How do we separate critique from criticism, and, you know, valid concerns from just like, you know, someone's projection or their own agenda?
Brent,
Yeah,
you asked me to let you know what the half-hour marks, or we're approaching the half-hour mark.
sure. Yeah, I got an eye on the time. I'd like to wrap up pretty quickly here. Let me just say a few more things. I don't know. Let me be a little critical of Peter because you invited me to, and I don't have a lot to go on here because like my prep was spread pretty wide, but you know, there's a couple lines here that stood out to me in a few of your articles about setting yourself on fire. Epistemic Cowboy number 39, set yourself on fire. You can only set yourself on fire if you own each word you use. Now, I really try to do that in my articles, and to whatever extent I can here today in speech. But you know, another aspect of that is like my rap battle videos, which were like tongue in cheek, is also kind of me setting myself on fire. At the same time, like 2 days after, on May 29th, I wrote an article on self-immolation, right? And so I'm trying to like draw contrast in the difference here between like taking all this stuff lightly and using these words playfully, as you're doing. And you have this theme in a couple other articles, right? Number 43, maybe that is hot, or maybe what is hot is publicly setting your life on fire, right? Again, you're talking figuratively. Number 61, women do not want to fuck a man who cannot set himself on fire. You know, and I get what you're trying to say. We're all trying to be spectacular and draw attention. But, you know, I'm not literally setting myself on fire, but, you know, I took really seriously the self-immolation theme. And it was, you know, very timely because a year prior, a guy set himself on fire and walked onto the White House lawn. And, you know, there's many cases like this, and we should pay attention to what the deeper message is of this, right? We should not be flattering our egos. We should not be backpatting ourselves and each other about how sexy and radical this sense-making stuff is, because it's not. It's just to try to help us along to find meaning in the meta crisis. And my meaning is solving the meta crisis. So I want all of you on board with that mission, because I think I'm already part of the broader mass movement. And I want to invite these little, you know, bubbles and enclaves to participate in that, instead of fence sitting and calling the shots from the sidelines. So let me close too with you know, Peter's point in one of his later articles, 73s, like my stoic patience for uploading videos, posting events and shit like that is coming to an end. So, I sympathize with his exhaustion with that technically, and my own. I'm fucking tired of all this bullshit, and, of how hard we all have to work to get ahead and to get through this. We need to really accelerate this process. Now is the time, as protests sweep the globe, and I'm going to name one person because I can't help myself. We should not be taking analysis from Jordan Hall. And I would be happy to talk to him privately or publicly to sort that out. But, he has these phrases like, simulated thinking, and I can't escape the fact that that's what I see when I hear him talk. So we should all follow our own advice better if we're going to give that kind of advice. Let's roll with the cues.
Cool. All right, thanks you, Brent, and thank you for reading my journals and actually numbering them, so I can go back and edit those lines out. So if you have any questions for Brent, just write it in the chat box. We have some good ones already. So I'll warm you up with a question. So Jared, James, Jason Snyder, and myself were, as you know, we're fans of this mimetic mediator term. And the question I have for you is, I guess, what is your sense on what that is, that the potential project is? Because it is still a new project and it's not really been defined if you ever come to the mediation campfires. And what do you think its negative and positive potential is?
Yeah, good question. I've been to a few campfires and I've had, private conversations with both of you about it. My criticism has been more what it's missing, right? Because I'm starting from my own meaning what mimetic mediation should be. But let me give you some credit, right? Because you guys have like skills, right, that you worked on and that take practice, and that's part of what you're developing. So it's diplomacy, mediation itself, conflict resolution. I have a lot of ideas of how I'd like to take that further. Like, how do we experimentally build consensus? I can't do that on my own, but I've got the research and the ideas to do it. My critique of the mimetic mediation is that, like, as Jason suggested in a tweet today, like, sometimes he can't tell the difference between all these competing viewpoints. He just absorbs them all. And not to place myself like higher in a hierarchy, but as a student, I went through phases like that, right? It's critical to go through those and put yourself in the shoes of a white supremacist or whatever it may be. But I think there's, like, we have to get through it to something. Like, there are good memes and bad memes to oversimplify. And I saw game B and mimetic mediation as not being sufficiently critical of the IDW that came before it, right? So it was baking in some of the same practices, some of the same, like, knowledge gaps and ignorance about theory, about race, about social justice, about postmodernism, right? Because there's nobody in those spaces who is like an authority, right? And so, I would be one person who has some authority on those topics, but we need a lot more, right? And what I was seeing in game B especially was the opposite of mediation. It was like literally canceling and kicking out anybody who was, like, sort of rocking the boat even constructively. Like, full disclosure, like, I can beat up on people, but I was kicked out essentially for calling racists racist. So, the deeper problem here is people are getting offended because they don't understand, like, nobody wants to be racist or be called racist. There are explicit racists out there, but the systemic problem is that, like, there's not been a sufficient public discourse about this stuff. Systemic racism is ongoing with the way the media handles things, with the way think tanks operate. And, the kind of feedback loop that people, give back to these leaders to pump them up. So it becomes a trap.
Cool. Thank you. Maybe Gray, you had a question.
Hi, Brent. Thanks for being here. I heard from you really early on in your introduction today that you felt that there's some really key self-learning and self-critique topics that sensemakers seem to have blind spots around. And I'd love to hear you riff more on that.
Sure. Well, they talk a lot about shadow work, right? And that's kind of a personal development hack to deal with your own trauma. But that has nothing to do with social issues and the epistemology of that. So my critique is like that there's not enough self-criticism of the ignorance. Like a lot of these problems are overdetermined by various social factors. And then in these spaces, our confidence becomes kind of overdetermined too. Like people are overconfident for various reasons. Like Rebel Wisdom has had a lot of kind of success in terms of traffic and audiences, and so has Game B and the people involved with these things. So there's a kind of momentum. There's a great degree of hesitance to not just engage in self-critique, but like to ask the tough, deeper questions, like what if I'm wrong about everything? Fundamentally. And I don't want to pick on certain people, especially without saying something nice, right? That's what's gonna let me be heard. But like the moderators in the Game B group and kind of under Jim Rutt's guidance and influence wanted to completely control the discourse, right? And this isn't like I hope to talk to Jim soon and like hope that the good faith and openness there means we can work through these things. But like there's the issue of him wanting to ban like race theories. It's one thing that's going to be pretty hostile to sense making about what's happening. But then like just on a much more basic level, I would use the word problematic, like this problematic or that person is problematic. And I try to use it in the way the word is meant, like that there's a set of problems that arise in the process of engagement, right? And he just didn't like that word. He wanted to ban the word, like let's not say problematic. And in prep for this, I came across some better definitions, like problematization. It's a way we kind of demythicize problems and deconstruct common knowledge that is taken for granted, so we can make a meta move and reform our thinking about it. But there's also something called, and I think Jim and others would be interested in this, it's called problematic integration theory. And it really puts a button on what I'm trying to say here, right? And I'll just read it. This is the definition from Wikipedia. Problematic integration theory is a theory of communication that addresses the processes and dynamics of how people receive, evaluate, and respond to information and experiences. The premises of problematic integration theory are based on the view that message processing, specifically the development of probabilistic and evaluative orientations, is a social and cultural construction, right? So, I mean, this is a sociological thing that, just for being sociological, it's in Jim's blind spot. But we all have a capacity. Jim's very intelligent, right? Going back to that, we all have a capacity to learn these things. So we can actually use this theory to work through some of these things and to unpack them. But it takes a process. It takes collaboration. It takes overcoming the fear of being wrong or called out. But this is how we get over disagreements that are generated from misinterpretation or bad premises, and hence why I say problematic, because all of the kind of disagreements that would crop up, like about politics and social justice, they weren't like, there was no coherence there. It didn't resonate with anything I'd studied or anything I'm currently working on related to these subjects. It was just kind of the standard reactionary dismissal of leftism, socialism, and politics in general. So I hope that is a sufficient answer.
Yeah, I
Okay.
agree.
Thank you, maybe. So we have a private, someone sent me a private question. I'll read on their behalf. Just let me find it. Okay. So who in your view is doing sense making well, or that you consider to be a high signal noise, good faith sources, and what is in the nature of their approach that transcends the critique that you have outlined here today at the Stoa?
So, Michael Brooks comes to mind because he's been on the Stoa, and, one of the things I've said to you, Peter, is that we can't just have conversations and then move on with our lives, right? Like, I participate in Michael Brooks's community. I take in all his content and and then some, right? Because there's many great thinkers on the left that few people know about. And so through a show like his, you have access to that, kind of other alternative sense making web, really. Like there's a lot of people. In terms of like really cutting edge intellectuals, like I reference Benjamin Bratton a lot. Zach, who's in the chat here, also likes Bratton. That kind of discourse just kind of flies overhead all of this kind of stuff. Like it's on another plane. And again, it's not like you have to dive into it. You can't just like graze on his body of work. You can't just interview him and think you're going to grok or download what his consciousness is, right? Like, so hopefully we're all in the process, and the people here can help lead in constructive ways the move away from these intellectual dark web thinkers, and they can decide for themselves whether to come along or not. But what seems to be happening is that they further alienate themselves into the center or the right. And that's the paradox at play here with all these communities like Integral and Rebel Wisdom that are invested in those so-called intellectuals and sense makers. A lot of also who I draw on is just like obscure scholars, like papers and books. I'm often collecting stuff more than I'm reading it. So that keeps me humble, because whenever you come across a popular article, like it's full of holes relative to what's out there, right? And one point I wanted to make that I thought about coming into this talk is like, a lot of us are thinkers, we're doing research, we're innovating. One thing researchers have to realize is that like most of the groundwork has already been laid. It's a matter of like realizing what was good from the past, right? And so, like I said in this book, like sometimes these anti-intellectuals are obsessed with old, outdated, antiquated, debunked ideas. There's so many good ideas in the past, so many things that have been realized early on. Like this book is very predictive and descriptive of the intellectual dark web, and it's from 1964, right? So we see history repeating itself. And so it's not just about, who's hot today, but, what are the gold standards? What can we really trust when we go back to? Yeah, aside from Michael Brooks, like, I want to give credit to, like Jacobin and Current Affairs. Like these are just kind of socialist outlets that produce content on a regular basis. And, they're doing something intellectual, right? And they're also doing something very pragmatic. Like what they are advocating for, in some sense, should line up with Game B stuff, right? If Game B wants to talk about the commons or, like decentralization or distribution, like you can't avoid and eschew this term and this tradition of socialism. So, these ideas are hijacked and bastardized in the culture war. Like, one of the simplest, most powerful arguments for me, you know, because I don't like debating and just, you know, going into the weeds of theory and policies. But Albert Einstein was a socialist, and he wrote about it. He wrote like in a 4-page essay called Why Socialism. You know, and that's what we should be thinking of when the word socialism comes up, right? Peterson, you know, happy birthday, Dr. Lobster, is always steering people in the opposite direction. Like, oh, the socialists, they're proto-fascists. All these hippies with placards, they're the real enemy. You know, like, I don't know whether to laugh or cry. It's utterly insane. And, you know, I say it kind of short and callously like that because I've seen all the critiques. I've written some of the critiques. Like, we should be over this guy by a long shot. And it's because there's not a culture that embraces critique and embraces these deep truths that we get stuck, and the meta crisis reproduces itself. The sense-making crisis reproduces itself. It's going to keep unfolding, you know, and, you know, short of saying what's happening in the world is a direct reflection of what's going on in here, you know, it's coincidental, but it's also kind of a microcosm. The more we fight over dumb things, you know, the more the pandemic is gonna kill people, and the more cops are gonna murder people. And, you know, like, you know, to bring it back to politics, like Bernie Sanders' platform, right? And Bernie Sanders aside, because he's, you know, kind of out of the picture now, the platform is solid. The platform addresses a lot of these systemic things. But the culture war insisted on politicizing it instead of just reading it and discussing it. And that's part of what I've been up to. You know, I engage this stuff, I read it. So, you know, I don't take well to being attacked by people who think that, you know, that Newt Gingrich, like, you know, Rush Limbaugh is a good person, and that Donald Trump is not racist, and that America does not have racism. You know, yeah.
So we're not going to get to all the questions today. I'm not going to read them in order, but one is alive for the chat box and the people in the room, and it's related to the one you just answered. It's from Jason Snyder, our boy Jason Snyder. Jason, would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yeah, Brent, just a really quick question, or a small question. I don't know if it's quick. Who are some thinkers that aren't on the socialist and or critical theory left that you learned from? And I ask this question because, you know, somebody coming in, I think I know where you're coming from, but somebody coming in might think that the arbiter of truth and, you know, the real intellect, intelligent conversation going on is on the left. And so I want to know who's not talking about socialism or critical theory that you find really worthwhile to engage with.
Yeah, that's a good question. I can probably come up with a more detailed answer later. But the first thing that comes to mind is comedians. Love lots of comedians, and I saw you tweeted Dave Chappelle clip, I think, and I did as well. Like, I love that shit. And, you know, he's speaking truth. And in the clip, he was criticizing Candace Owens, right? And Candace Owens, you know, sort of, you know, adjacent to the intellectual dark web, and, like, you know, was a big part of the Dave Rubin craze, has enormous influence. For whatever reason, she's, you know, she's incredibly popular. Is it because she's smart? Is it because she's, like, attractive? Probably a little. But, you know, or is it because the United States has a systemic racism problem and she's papering over that and making people feel okay about it? I think it's the latter. And that's what Dave Chappelle was pointing out, right? And so Dave Chappelle's not theorizing about socialism. And in fact, I think he supported Andrew Yang. You know, so I do go outside the left, and I do also seek out conservative thinkers. But in this moment, in this day and age, it is so hard to parse that, and it might in fact be impossible or counterproductive, right? So I'm not, you know, for whatever I can do in it, I try to encourage people who want to identify as conservative to build out this like much better brand. I'm going to talk with Justin Carmian this weekend, who's like a meta-modern colleague, if you will, but he identifies as conservative, and we have a pretty good relationship across that. So, you know, he has a lot of knowledge, right? So I respect what he knows, and I respect his thinking process. You know, as long as he's not trying to import any ridiculous dogma, I have no problem with engaging him over that and encouraging, you know, that kind of bipartisanship. But yeah, I don't know. That's all I'll say on that.
Cool. So looks like Naomi and Ron are both tapping out their questions for each other. So maybe Naomi, if you want to unmute yourself and read yours. Looks like Ron also suggested you should go.
Hey, sure. Okay. So let's see. I want to forward a premise that I sort of go with from time to time, especially when I'm frustrated with not being able to figure out why people in a particular sense-making arena are able to entertain, you know, much more entertain critiques of themselves, which is that there's an integralist way to see this, in which the IDW and the SJW and everything else, everything in between, are essentially like avatars of communities that need to sort things out in their own particular way. So I'm wondering if you see this, if there's a way to see this as a version of collective sense making in and of itself. And so instead of attempting to, you know, kind of go in with a scalpel and try to fix what's wrong with any particular group, but rather to have them hash things out in their own way. And if that is the case, what would be the mechanisms by which these collective sense-making bundles, so to speak, are able to come together in some way?
Yeah, I mean, I think in a sense, and there's a quote here, I think in here in the responsibility of intellectuals from Chomsky, that, and in the Anti-Intellectualism book, that, like, you know, an intellectual has to go in with a scalpel and like surgically like address some of this stuff. But at the same time, like, yeah, sure, like there's many different like communities, like, and there's stuff outside of this that we're not even talking about. Like, what about like Scientology, right? Like, are we just gonna like let that be because a lot of people are okay with it, or is it actually a dangerous cult and kind of, you know, like money scheme? Like, what is it, right? And what's its relationship to justice? But I think, you know, it comes back to the intellectual dark web calling themselves intellectual, and that they should actually be interested in these topics that would make them more self-critical and reflective. And given their role as kind of public speakers, you know, with followings, I think whatever they do, you know, they can lead people in a new direction, right? That's always the opportunity here. What instead tends to happen is like what's happening with Dave Rubin. Like, he just goes further and further to the right, making more money and completely selling out his sense making. And not only is that happening, all his so-called friends have just abandoned him and thrown him under the bus, right? And so one thing I've been lobbying for behind the scenes is that we should actually like do way better to take care of each other, like to call in, to reach out, you know, and it's hard, right? Because people will say like, yeah, well, I tried, you know, I tried to criticize so-and-so and they wouldn't have it. And then I'm like, yeah, exactly. Like, this is the problem. We can't criticize each other. We can't learn. We're stuck, you know, going in circles on some of these just really bad ideas. And, you know, so I don't know, we can only be in control of ourselves, right? That's the kind of stoic value proposition. You have to just accept it. And so as time goes on, that's what I'm trying to do more too. Like, you know, I made the videos and do long critiques because like that's my purpose as an intellectual. I just have to say, fuck it. And I want to read an anecdote quickly along these lines. Like, so my classics professor, he fashioned himself as kind of a Tyler Durden type of guy, and he would always bring up this parallel from antiquity who was called Hippocrates. And Hippocrates was a guy who was like competing for a wife, and he made it to the end, and in the final contest, like the night before, he decided to get drunk and just dance away his concerns, you know. And then one of the other guys is like, he's like, you just lost the competition like on your own. And then he said, Hippocrates doesn't care. And that phrase actually was like, became a common expression in the ancient world, right? And the contemporary equivalent would be like, no fucks given, right? So Hippocrates is like, I don't care. I place my own kind of values and priorities above the expectations of society. And so that's kind of what I'm trying to do. But at the same time, like, I do care a lot. So, you know, there's a lot of like this kind of critical knowledge out there. And I think like that's what needs to become the next addictive craze. But it's not something that is really amenable to like going viral, because it's, you know, it's an individual thing, and it involves a lot of this like sticking your neck out and speaking truth to power. So, you know, try to criticize somebody like from like find some good foundations, you know. Like I think of like another juxtaposition I like to bring in is like Steven Pinker and Phil Torres. You know, they're two guys who've just gone back and forth, and no progress has been made. But like, you know, take the critical side and try to criticize somebody like Pinker or an integralist or a centrist, and see what happens. You know, it's not fun, and you're not going to get far, because you're going to be scapegoated. You're going to be straw man. And, you know, this, you know, then you start to learn with me, like how difficult it is to try to insert yourself into people's like nonsense and bullshit. And,
Brent,
you know,
we're approaching the hour. I just wanted to give you opportunity to maybe have a brief closing thoughts and maybe plug anything that you're working on, articles that you'd like people to read or whatnot, or any upcoming rap battle. I'm curious about that as well.
Sure. Yeah, I wouldn't tell anybody if there was, right? It's got to be a surprise. Let me just close with a few random quotes. Howard Zinn says, you can't be neutral on a moving train. You know, like I said, everything is political. Like you have to get involved, and it doesn't mean advocating for somebody if you don't know what you're doing. It means just like learning. And what else? Yeah, so the articles I shared at the beginning of the chat at the top, those are the ones kind of relevant to today's talk, right? I didn't have a lot of chance to get into the details of the different ones. But a lot of it is just aggregating other critiques, right? I'm making a meta critique. So if people are interested in that stuff, check it out. Don't be afraid. Comment on the articles. Reach out to me. Okay, all of this stuff is up for grabs, and also, you know, just broadly the rest of my work, because a lot of it is not along these critical or journalistic lines. It's about kind of, you know, theory, or, you know, the kind of futurism, and, you know, along the lines of Game B, what the broad kind of attractors and directions we should be focused on to actually, you know, achieve a better world for everybody, not an exclusive one, not one that's just like focused on the survival of the species and, you know, fuck black people, right? Yeah, so I'll close there, and I'm happy to keep going in another session since this one has to be closed.
Cool. So all Brent's writings are, I just posted them here. Not all of them are the ones that he posted above. So you can check those out. In a moment, I'll make some upcoming announcements on events. But first, Brent, thanks so much for coming today. It's greatly appreciated. And So yeah, upcoming events. I'll mention one next week. It's the author or co-author with Ben Burgess, The Myth of Mayhem, a leftist critique of Jordan Peterson. He's coming in on June 16th at 4 p.m. Eastern time to do a session called Marx's Epicureanism and Peterson's Stoicism. And Peterson's not a Stoic, so I'm curious how he's going to tie that in. But that should be an intriguing event, so you can RSVP to that. We have a wisdom gym. We have about 10 recurring events. Socratic speed dating is coming up shortly. Definitely check that out. Being a walking erection is optional. So if you're not that currently, you can just, feel free to come in. And the Stoa is based off a gift economy. We're viewing it as a gift for us to use in this time of need. If you're inspired to provide a gift to the Stoa, just go to the website. Actually, you can go to the website, the Stoa/gift. All right. And I'll just put the Game B Coffee House. No one uses that. I think it's Game B Coffee, or is it Cafe? I'll try either of those. It's usually empty. You can just jump into that one and continue this discussion if you so choose. So yeah, thank you everyone for coming out today.
Thank you.